Chapter 8 Social Skills. The second presidential debate of 1992 between U.S. President George H.W. Bush and Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas was one of the most memorable moments of the general election. It would highlight to the world the social expertise of the new president. Bill Clinton is the epitome of charisma and social skill. Even regular people have said that when you talked to President Clinton, it felt like the whole world stopped and it was just you and him because he would stop, give you his complete and undivided attention, and talk to you in a way that made you feel like his good friend. During the Q&A portion of the event, a lady was given the microphone and asked Bush her question. Bush got up from his seat, which was about 30 feet from her, and started to answer. He was clearly caught off guard by her question because he bumbled around for a bit and started answering a question that wasn't exactly what she wanted. When another person stepped in and clarified her original question, Bush did what he could to answer. Addressing the crowd as a whole, he gave a fairly solid answer, although it wasn't necessarily memorable. Clinton had the chance to answer the same question. He got out of his seat that was beside Bush and immediately walked right up to the woman to answer her question. He related to her question, sharing a few touching stories about his experiences, and answered her question with exceptional delivery and professionalism. The whole time he was talking, he didn't break eye contact to look at another person, even though there was a decent-sized crowd to whom he could have turned his attention. The woman was fully engaged in her interaction with Clinton and appeared extremely satisfied with the answer. Regardless of his politics or his scandals, there's no denying that Bill Clinton is a master of social skills. You don't need to be the leader of the free world to have this level of social skill. It can be developed with practice and habit. Strong social skills are paramount to your success in being social because how you speak represents how you can communicate with everything going on internally. However, I'll put this chapter near the end of the self-improvement part of this book, as a lot of people's social problems are caused not because they lack true social skills, but because of all the other internal issues they face. Your problem may not be you don't know what to say. It may be the fear of rejection. Your problem may not be that you aren't funny, but you may lack mental sharpness as a result of poor health. However, becoming socially competent is important, and this chapter is dedicated to help you improve. Small talk is not boring if you're not. To some people, small talk can seem boring, shallow, and unnecessary, but it's far more important than you may consciously realize. Let's say a random man you've never met before is introduced to you at a party. After shaking hands and exchanging names, he immediately tells you about how his dog died last weekend and he had to cancel his plans with his friends because he was too occupied grieving and crying over the loss of his dog. How would you react? While you may feel sorry for him, you probably won't be able to help thinking, what is wrong with this guy? This is exactly why small talk is so important. Small talk allows people to establish a sense of commonality and to share and gather information about each other. The information you gather allows you to assess whether the person with whom you're speaking is a threat or not. It also allows you to assess their social status, their emotional stability, their mood, and everything that is important to feeling safe and building a connection. Let's say that same dogless man was introduced to you at a party and he started a conversation with small talk. The interaction would have opened a window for both of you to be vulnerable if you were comfortable enough with each other to do so. Small talk is important, but it can be boring if one or both of you suck at it. Here's how to brighten up your boring small talk. How to be socially entertaining. Small talk usually won't consist of super deep emotions. Mostly, it will be lighthearted, shallow, and fun. Nevertheless, it's still extremely important. Learning how to be socially engaging will make whomever you're speaking with more receptive to you and will further friendship. The yes and mentality. The yes and mentality means you take a conversational thread and add something onto it. Think of it like playing tennis. For a tennis game to be fun, both players need to keep hitting the ball back and forth. One person serves, starts a conversational topic, and the other hits the ball back, good reply, and they go back and forth, building on each other's reply. If you take a look at any good, free-flowing conversation, both people are following this exact principle, whether they know it or not. Example of a yes and conversation about sports. A. Do you watch any sports? B. Yeah, I watch basketball. A. Did you see Kawhi's game winner against the Sixers? B. That was awesome. They're going to go all the way this year. Conversation continues. Notice how each person added to what the other person said? This would naturally continue until someone brings up another topic of conversation and they go again from there. Of course, in this example, the person had knowledge of the topic of conversation, basketball, but the same principle holds true, even if one isn't too knowledgeable about the topic. Example of a yes and conversation about sports, but one person isn't as knowledgeable. A. Do you watch any sports? B. I watch sports here and there, but I don't really follow. A. You should have seen it yesterday. Kawhi Leonard from the Toronto Raptors hit a game winner against the Sixers in the last game of the playoff series. The ball was bouncing around the rim and finally went in and the crowd went crazy. B. I wish I saw that. What happens now? A. Now the Raptors play the Milwaukee Bucks. B. Who do you think wins that? Conversation continues. The opposite of a yes and conversation is when someone gives an answer that doesn't add on to anything the other person mentioned, and the burden of restarting the conversation goes back to the person who started the topic initially. A fun, free-flowing conversation is like a tennis game where both people are hitting the ball back and forth after one person serves. But a conversation where someone gives a boring, flat answer is like serving the ball, and no one's there. So you have to run over to the other side of the court, pick up your ball, run back to your side, and serve again. That is a very lonely game that the person will leave sooner rather than later. Example of a conversation that the other person doesn't add to. A. Do you watch any sports? B. Not really. A. What do you usually watch? B. I don't usually watch anything. You might laugh when you read this example, but this type of conversation is extremely common. If it wasn't such a big problem, I wouldn't be writing this. Be knowledgeable. Conversations using the second example of the yes and mentality are good for when you don't know what the topic of conversation is about. But if most of the conversation with the other person is like that, it will also become a boring conversation, since it will seem like a one-sided explanation of various topics. Most people like explaining and teaching things to people, but not for the majority of the conversation or friendship. Going back to our tennis analogy, a conversation where one person is knowledgeable and the other is not is like Roger Federer playing against an infant. Roger is going to blast 117 mile per hour serves, and the infant is not going to hit any balls back, so there's virtually no chance of a fun back and forth. Being knowledgeable doesn't require you to be a walking, talking Google or have 5 doctorate degrees, but it means you know enough about what you're talking about. Ideally, you should have several topics you know inside out, and also about a wide range of topics. The range of being knowledgeable includes being an expert on the topic. You know a lot about the subject and you can explain virtually anything about it to anyone. Being educated on the topic. You know enough about the conversation to offer interesting perspectives and to share information. Being conversational about the topic. You know enough about the topic to hold your own in a conversation. Being ignorant about the topic. You don't know much about the topic. Common topics of conversation include sports, hockey, basketball, American football, baseball, football, soccer, boxing/mixed martial arts, politics, world events, movies and television shows, video games, books, podcasts, businesses, career, finance, health and fitness, music, the city/town you live in, food, alcohol, celebrities, travel, children, restaurants, cars, coffee/tea, cooking, clothes, shopping, goals and habits, social media, self-improvement, languages, animals, history, psychology, law, science, religion, dating/sex. Humor. People connect very strongly over shared laughter. Think about all the best moments you've had with your friends. Many of those moments involved you two laughing and enjoying yourselves, right? Humor is a way for us to laugh, enjoy ourselves, and connect, but it's not that complicated. You don't need to be a Dave Chappelle or a Kevin Hart to make stadiums full of people laugh with every other sentence. A few funny moments throughout an interaction is all you need. Rules of humor. Humor, like anything else, does not happen by accident. There are certain rules that make humor effective. Commit to the humor. Something that makes people extremely funny is their commitment to humor. If you watch any good stand-up comedian, you'll notice that when they're telling a story or joke, they are fully committed to the delivery. Everything from their vocal tonality, facial expression, and body language is a part of the joke. What do people who aren't funny do? They say their joke half-heartedly or don't even say it at all, which results in them not being funny. The difference between them and the Dave Chappelles of the world, aside from talent, is vulnerability. Comedians are extremely socially vulnerable when they are on stage. They're fully committed to telling a joke, and if it falls flat and the audience doesn't laugh, they can look like a complete fool on stage. They are willing to do this because they know that the full commitment to their joke is what makes the joke funny in the first place. People who aren't funny hedge their bets by being duller and less enthusiastic, which works even further against them. Being committed to your humor doesn't necessarily mean you're crazy, loud, and over the top. It just means you are telling jokes without hesitation, also known as being socially vulnerable. Kevin Hart is super crazy and over the top when he is committed to telling a joke or a skit, but Dave Chappelle is often pretty calm and relaxed. Both are extremely funny people. Don't overdo humor. Overdoing humor can be just as annoying as not being humorous at all. Unless you can be funny without putting much effort into it, or you have a funny personality, don't seek to overdo the humor. Being constantly funny works great if the majority of the things you say are funny, which comes from experience, talent, and a certain personality. But if you are working on becoming funny, just worry about being funny a few times as opposed to trying to do a 1-hour Netflix comedy special. Make yourself laugh. Otherwise referred to as self-amusement, this is when you focus on making yourself laugh, which invites the other person to laugh too. This reduces your need to be socially vulnerable because you're not depending on the other person to make your joke succeed. You simply tell a story or joke, which makes you laugh and enjoy yourself, and then the other person can join in on your laughter if they find it funny too. Make them feel included. People love humor when they feel like they're in on the joke, not when they're the butt of the joke. You can be funny and be a complete asshole, or you can be funny and supercharge your connection. The difference is who is at the butt of the joke. If either no one or you, yourself, are the joke, then it's funny and inclusive, since you and the person or people you're trying to make laugh are laughing together. But if the person or people you're trying to make laugh are the victims in the joke, the situation becomes threatening and standoffish. Jokes and stories that don't have to do with the other person should be fine for the most part, but if you are going to joke about the other person, keep the humor either neutral or build them up. Don't push them down. If someone has messy hair today, you can joke that the hair makes them look more badass if they put on a really nice suit and pretend to be the boss anytime they walk into a room. Build them up. Or you can say something like, they're looking closer and closer to the Joker with every passing day. Neutral, depending on how it's delivered. But if you say something like, it looks like someone shaved your hair and put a dead raccoon on your head, this is obviously quite insulting. This is why self-deprecation is so effective. Self-deprecation makes the joke teller the victim of the joke and allows the other person to laugh with you while you laugh at yourself. If the joke teller had messy hair, then saying something like, it looks like someone shaved my hair and put a dead raccoon on it, could be pretty funny. Self-deprecating humor works well if the joke teller is someone who is confident and or of a high status, since the joke brings them down a notch and makes them feel more relatable. But if the other person is quite depressive, unconfident, or makes too many self-deprecating jokes, it can be just sad. Self-deprecating humor follows the other rule of humor. Don't overdo it. If you do end up making a joke that seeks to put someone down, also known as a diss, roast, or tease, make sure to go about it in a socially intelligent way. This means be careful of what you joke about. Make sure you're not laughing at the expense of someone else's insecurities. Nothing would kill a potential friendship faster than laughing at someone's insecurity, whether the person making the joke was intentionally hurtful or not. How to be funny. There could be an entire book or course created on how to be funny, but we'll outline 3 common humor tactics used by everyone from your funny uncle, famous comedians, to people like you and me. Saying the unexpected. When someone tells us a story or a joke, our brains naturally try and anticipate what they'll say next, but saying the unexpected breaks that pattern, which shocks our brains and makes us laugh as a result. To illustrate the point about anticipation, pretend you're in this conversation. You. Hey Mark, how's it going? Mark. I'm doing well, what's up with you? You. Just reading this great book on leading a social life. Did you catch that basketball game last night? Mark. Yeah, the game-winning dunk was crazy. You. I can't believe how tall people in the NBA are. Mark. Yeah, I heard some people would breed with giraffes in an attempt to make their kids taller. Wasn't that funny? When you said, I can't believe how tall people in the NBA are, you were expecting Mark to respond with something along the lines of tall people in the NBA. But nope, he was talking about human baby giraffes. Obviously, Mark isn't being serious, but his saying the unexpected would have made anyone laugh. Exaggeration. Exaggeration is when you take something either normal or slightly funny and blow it out of proportion. The joke is in the exaggeration of the original topic. This is funny because it is unexpected, but also because exaggeration makes things sound ridiculous. Examples of exaggeration could be, my coffee didn't taste very good today. Yeah, I don't think the slaves who harvested beans cared if it tastes good or not. Dark humor, but still funny. The Seahawks are going to the Super Bowl this year. Yeah, I think they'll win more than one game. Understatements are a form of exaggeration. I died laughing at that movie. Same. My mom was about to call the coffin store telling them they were about to get a new customer. Playing a character. This one is my favorite. Playing a character is either when you imitate somebody or something to make an example, when you exaggerate something another person said, or when you say the unexpected. The key to playing a character is to make your vocal tonality different so the other person knows that you're switching roles. If you're going to play a character well, make sure to commit fully to playing the character. If you're going to imitate a movie character, for example, commit fully. You don't want a half-character, half-real person. This ruins the whole point of being a character. It would be extremely difficult to write out how to play a different character, but watch pretty much any comedian since they play different characters many times during their shows. Notice their commitment to the character. Not just questions. If you keep bombarding the other person with questions, it may start feeling like a corporate job interview more than a fun conversation. Mix it up by making statements instead of constantly questioning. Statements give the other person an opportunity to add into the conversation at their own will, which could lead them investing more in the conversation and/or bringing up some new perspectives. Examples of turning questions into statements include, instead of asking someone what they're going to do this weekend, share what you will do. Instead of asking someone what they do for work, share something cool that you do. Instead of asking someone a question to get over an awkward silence, make a comment on something. Storytelling. One alternative to talking in questions and statements is to tell a story. Humans are designed to be fascinated by stories, connect over sharing stories, and learn very well through stories. These are some of the reasons why I include multiple stories in my chapters. To keep you reading, to better connect with you, and to help you learn. You may or may not remember facts, but you certainly understand them if I tell an interesting story to go along with them. This is also the reason why you probably love to read stories, watch movies and TV shows, and play video games, because they're all variations of stories. Everything from Thomas the Tank Engine to Assassin's Creed video games are all stories. Pretty much all stories share the same general pattern. Stories can be of varying lengths, and what you include in each part is up to you, but they're all similarly structured. Introduction. Introduce the context and the people involved. Build up. Build up the details and tell the story leading up to the main point. Climax. This is the main point of the story, the big, dramatic moment of the story or the main idea you want to get across. Alternatively, consider the anticlimax. The anticlimax is when the listener has been built up to expect a big climax, but instead, the climax turns out to be something insignificant and/or unexpected, which also can make for a great story. Winding down. This doesn't happen for all stories, but after the climax, you can start to close the gaps and prepare listeners for the conclusion. Alternatively, repeat the build-up. Some stories don't just have one main point. If there are multiple, repeat the build-up after the first climax. Conclusion. This is where you signal to the listener that the story is over. A 5,000 to 1 odds that actually happens. In this section, we will break down a story into the different parts we just discussed. Introduction. Leicester City FC is an English professional soccer club, but to be frank, they were never historically relevant in the world's football stage. In the 2013-14 season, they won the English Football League Championship, England's second highest overall football league, which meant the next season they were going to be promoted to the top league, the English Premier League. The next season wouldn't be much different. The 2014-15 season would conclude with Leicester City FC coming in 14th place out of 20 clubs, below average, but nothing out of the ordinary for the club who's never experienced much success previously. Build-up. The betting odds for the 2015-16 Premier League season reflected Leicester City's chances of success. Bookmakers had Leicester City FC at 5,000 to 1 odds of winning the Premier League that season. To put this in perspective, England's top bookmaker, William Hill, offered 5,000 to 1 odds that President Barack Obama would play cricket for England once he vacated the White House. Yes, an American president playing cricket for England and a football club winning a football championship had the same probability of happening. Climax. And then it started to happen. They start to win. A lot. They consistently beat their fellow Premier League clubs, drew many crucial matches with top-ranked clubs, draws still count for a point, and lost only 3 matches out of 38 to win the Premier League for the first time in history. This is often described as one of the greatest sporting stories of all time. Winding down. I feel kind of bad for the bookmakers. They are likely not going to ever give out 5,000 to 1 odds for football anymore. One Leicester City FC fan who bet €50 ended up cashing his bet early for €72,000. He stood to win €250,000 if he saw his bet through to the end of the season. Conclusion. Wouldn't it be crazy if that ever happened again? Deeper connections build connection. Although we discussed why small talk is important for your social skills, we can't just rely on small talk. You will eventually need to get into deeper conversation if you want to build real connections. When to have deeper conversation. There's no hard and fast rule on when small talk ends and when you're allowed to transition into deep conversation. The best rule of thumb is when you're comfortable enough with the other person. Although this is mostly a subconscious feeling, if you were to measure comfort with another person, it would be by how much you trust them. Trust may take a long time to build with some people you meet, but for others, trust can be developed within the first interaction. There are people I've known for years that I don't trust, so I stick with small talk when I speak with them. But there are people I've just met who seemed open, friendly, and trustworthy enough that I was comfortable enough to at least start testing the waters of deep conversation. How to transition to deeper conversation. Transitioning to deeper conversations isn't a specific phase or procedure. It's when you introduce topics of conversations that are more personal, that allow you to get to know the other person better, and vice versa. You can do this by changing the topic of conversation, telling a deeper story, asking for someone's opinions on something personal, raising deeper questions, or providing some knowledgeable insight. You start sharing slightly deeper things, and if you and the other person with whom you're speaking click on that level, you can go a level deeper, then continue progressing as long as both of you are comfortable with it. Let's just say there are 100 levels to a conversation. Level 1 being shallow conversation and level 100 being the deepest secret you haven't told anyone. When you're transitioning to small talk to deeper conversations, it doesn't make sense for you to start sharing level 50 or 60 type information yet. You start out by sharing things that are around levels 1 to 5, such as something that's happened at work or a small problem you're dealing with at home. These moments of slight vulnerability let the person know that you have layers to you that go past the surface level interaction you're having. It's a good start to opening a door for deeper conversation at a later time. Deep conversation is also a two-way street. If you hung out with someone multiple times and you're sharing level 20 type things at a point where the other person's still at level 3, there's a disconnect that will inevitably lead to an awkward relationship. If you're sharing things in a reasonable, socially calibrated manner, it may be very well that the other person is not capable of being emotionally vulnerable, which is far more common than you may realize. Aside from sharing deeper details, such as live streams of sensitive secrets, deeper conversation also comes from when you start understanding why people do things and how they feel. Understanding why allows you to learn more about other people's values, thoughts, and opinions. Learning about their feelings allows you to connect with them, since connection is about being emotionally connected, not logically connected. Miscellaneous social skills. There are a number of important miscellaneous social skills that you will have to learn in order to be able to have great conversations, whether it be during small talk or deeper conversation. Awkward silences. If you're going to have conversations with people, silences are inevitable. The question is the silence going to be awkward? If you get into a silence and you rush to fill it or stare awkwardly at the other person and your surroundings, then the other person will mirror your internal state. This is what awkward silences are, when the people are awkward in the silence, not the silence itself. Just understanding that silences will happen is a giant step. This may sound obvious when you read it, but think about it in your own life. When silence happens, do you feel like you're obligated to fill it? You don't need to be super connected with the other person to a point where every second is filled with noise. If awkward thoughts come up, be mindful of them, acknowledge, investigate, and accept them, then go back to talking when you feel ready. The other person is probably having the same kinds of thoughts. Keeping a conversation going. Earlier in the book, we discussed that asking how to keep a conversation going is the wrong way to frame your problem, which is true. Most conversations that don't flow well have to do with either person, or both, not being comfortable enough with each other to continue introducing new topics. Assuming that you're comfortable enough with the other person, there are still tactical errors that lead to conversation stalling out. We discussed in the small talk section the importance of not giving boring, flat answers, but instead using the yes and mentality to continue adding things to say. There are a number of other tactics you can use to continue the conversation. Be interested and be interesting. Common conversation advice given by friends, family, the internet, or the classic self-help book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, says to ask people about themselves and get them talking about themselves. This didn't work, but for a real conversation with real connection to happen, both people need to be sharing the conversational burden. Conversation branching. Almost every naturally flowing conversation works according to the following. One person says something, The other person responds to the subject. They go back and forth. The other person starts another conversational topic related to the one they first talked about, and repeat. For example, if someone says, "Last summer, my friends and I went on a camping trip where we got really drunk and told funny stories around a campfire," you can talk about any of the related topics that the other person said. I call this conversation branching. You can most certainly ask the other person about their camping trip, but if you want to talk, you can branch off and talk about your own experiences. With the same line, you can talk about the following. "Last summer, my friends and I went on a camping trip where we got really drunk and told funny stories around campfire. I spent the entirety of last summer working. My friends and I once took a weekend trip to Montreal. The last time I went on a camping trip, once I got really drunk and I have a funny story. I have a great campfire story." Topic changers. You don't have to have an exact, logical chain of topics in order to talk about things. If you're comfortable enough with the other person, you can most certainly jump off into another topic, story, or question by using topic changers such as "reminds me of," "one time," "kind of random but," etc. That reminds me of one time my friends and I went to get Italian food and they were out of pizza. What kind of Italian place is out of pizza? One time I went to the grocery store and forgot my wallet. I had to have the grocery store keep my items on hold while I took a bus home, got my wallet, bussed there, and took an Uber home. This is kind of random, but what country would you travel to if you could pick? Ending conversations. Every conversation you enter will be left eventually. For conversations that don't come to a natural end at a convenient time, you will have to choose to leave when you want to. The best conversation endings are usually ones that feel socially calibrated and don't make the other person feel like you're leaving them abruptly. You must understand that it's okay to end a conversation, and leaving doesn't mean you hate the other person. You can end a conversation by signaling or by verbally leaving. Signaling is when you indirectly communicate that you're done with the conversation. Common signals include starting to turn your body away from the other person, answering with shorter, less engaging words, checking your phone, or not contributing to the conversation. You can also resume what you were doing before. If you were working on something, you can calmly go back to working on it. If the other person doesn't end the conversation after you signal, or you don't want to signal and want to verbally tell them you're ending the conversation, you can use the following phrases. "It was good seeing you. I'm going to head out now. Anyway, I should get going. If you'll excuse me, I have to get back to blank. It was good seeing you. I should get back to blank." Group conversations. Group conversations have different dynamics compared to one-on-one conversations, since group conversations are a collection of all the participants' social behavior. In group conversations, you don't need to light up the entire conversation. There's less pressure, since other people can carry the conversational burden. But the challenge is usually how not to stay quiet. You can contribute to the conversation by adding interesting conversational topics like any social interaction, or you can simply add responses, since you don't carry 50% of the conversational burden. Group conversations are harder to get a chance to speak, since there are multiple people trying to contribute to the conversation instead of you and another person. The best times to add your contribution is when there's a silence or after someone says something. When you do speak up, make sure to commit completely into your words and say them with conviction. Words that are backed up with a strong, respectable presence usually don't get interrupted, and when they do, they still get acknowledged. It's when you enter the conversation quietly and weakly that you get interrupted or talked over. Nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is a significant part of social interactions. It is one of the reasons why digital forms of communication such as social media, text, and email don't compare to being face-to-face with someone. Entire chapters or books could be written about nonverbal communication. There are a few simple things you can do to help improve your nonverbal communication, but here's a general principle. Nonverbal communication is a reflection of your internal state. Sure, you can tell someone to smile more and make eye contact with them, but that usually comes naturally to most people when they feel comfortable and positive. In this chapter, we are looking to tighten tactical gaps in your social skills. If you find yourself struggling greatly with improving aspects of nonverbal communication, chances are it's an internal problem, since nonverbal communication is strongly influenced by your inner state. If this is the case for you, go back to Chapter 7 and work on feeling comfortable and positive. Smile and laugh openly. A lot of people who struggle socially also struggle with expressing themselves properly. Learning to smile and laugh openly with a sense of freedom opens you up to feeling more comfortable and positive, makes the other person more interested in you, since you are signaling interest in the interaction and in them, and causes the other person to do the same thing due to mirroring. When building this into a habit, work on smiling openly before moving on to laughing, since smiling openly naturally leads to laughing openly. But laughing openly without smiling can come off as socially uncalibrated. This isn't about faking laughing or being ingenuine, but about opening yourself up to a point where you can laugh easily when opportunities allow for it. Eye contact. Eye contact is key to building trust and intimacy with others, but there's a balance. As a general rule, keep good eye contact, but don't stare. Body language. Your body language is a reflection of your internal state and signals how you're feeling towards other people. If you're presenting negative body language to another person but your internal state is positive, the other person will get mixed signals but may easily end up interpreting the negative over the positive as we usually instinctively do. Facing the other person, carrying strong posture, and opening your body language are among the most impactful things you can do when it comes to communicating through your body. You don't need to follow these body language or nonverbal rules 100% of the time, but you should use them as often as possible. Face the other person when possible, or put better, avoid facing away from them. There are instances where you obviously can't face someone, such as when you're walking or sitting in certain places, and that's fine. It's sometimes even beneficial, since facing directly in front of someone can be seen as confrontational. But you want to avoid facing away from the other person. This will help to communicate that you're receptive and interested. Carrying strong posture helps other people respect you and perceive you as more confident, since you are carrying your body in a way that conveys external and internal strength. Stand up with your back straight, shoulders back, and head straight. Last but not least, shift your body language. Open body language means free-flowing arms, revealing your torso area and exposing your neck. Closed body language means crossing your arms, making yourself as small as possible, and keeping your head tucked. Open body language signals that you're not perceiving the other person as a threat. Social intelligence. Social intelligence is the type of intelligence that can either support or prevent well-intentioned people from developing connections with other people. Without social intelligence, even good, kind, well-meaning people may not be able to create fulfilling social relationships. Being social can be summarized by understanding people and behaving accordingly. The general principle in regard to creating a social life is to understand what other people think and how they feel, and to be aware of how you affect their thoughts and feelings. Don't criticize other people. The most obvious principle to follow when it comes to understanding what other people think and feel is not directly create negative feelings in them. Negative feelings often come in the form of criticism. Criticism affects the other person's self-image because their identity and what they believe to be true about themselves, being smart, good, right, etc., is directly challenged. Unless you absolutely need to point out something critical about someone, refrain from doing so. If you find yourself being overly critical of others, it most likely has to do with judgments of yourself that you haven't worked through yet. Instead of dealing with them internally, you try to project them outwards. Be aware of other people's insecurities. One of the biggest sources of people's negative thoughts are their insecurities. Criticizing someone can easily reveal their insecurities, so this is another reason not to criticize. But it goes further than that. You can easily trigger a person's insecurities unintentionally or without even doing anything. Some of the best, kindest people in the world can trigger people's insecurities quite easily, whether it's by something that they said that wasn't even directed at them, or the fact that they represent something that the other person wants but doesn't have. Control what you can control in these cases. You can control what you say and what you do, but if you represent something that sparks someone else's insecurities, it isn't your fault. It's just a mismatch. A list of possible things people can be insecure about include health, physical appearance, job, money, social status, intelligence, social ability, mental state, romantic relationship, friends, sexual history, age, lack of independence, upbringing, embarrassing things they've done. Validate others. Humans have a craving to be validated by others. Validation is a huge part of the primal social connection we create because validation directly signals to the other person that we like them and accept them. Validation is the complete opposite of feeling lonely, since loneliness is the lack of connection. When people are in any sort of interaction with each other, assuming they get past the phase where they don't see each other as a threat, the thing going through their minds is, do they like me? This is why we put on our best selves for people we just met. why we post pictures on social media, and why we do nice things for others, because we need to know if people like us or not. People with high internal security can go a bit longer without direct validation, but nevertheless, humans are still humans. We all need validation. This isn't just limited to the first time you give someone validation, although that is a big step in any relationship. People need constant reassurance that they are liked by other people. Try not giving your partner any more validation, since you've already given them enough in the past, and see how long that works out. It probably wouldn't last. Validating others can include listening actively and making them feel heard, engaging with their thoughts or opinions, giving them compliments, doing thoughtful acts, calling them your friend, directly telling them you like them. Active listening. I firmly believe that the most important part of conversation is what you do to listen. Everybody loves to talk, and many people are good at talking, but your ability to listen well is what will make the interactions far better and make people feel important. Active listening is the key to making your interactions more fulfilling. Active listening is focusing intently on the other person and showing them you are present. First, start with removing distractions. When you are listening to someone, you're focusing on them and nothing else. You're not looking over in the distance, looking at other people, or checking or scrolling through your phone. Of course, this, like anything in this section, doesn't mean you follow this rule every single second, but take it as a general principle. Next is to show you're present and direct your attention towards them. Removing distractions clears one hurdle, but the next step is to intently focus on the other person. This means you should turn your body towards them, if possible, maintain strong eye contact, listen to what they're saying, and stay present in the conversation. Make someone feel heard. This one is the natural next step to active listening. Without active listening, it's impossible to make someone feel heard. When someone feels heard, it essentially means they feel understood. When someone feels understood, they feel like the other person understands what they're saying, but also why they're saying it. This concept is what marriage researcher Dr. John Gottman calls bids for emotion. A bid for emotion is when a partner does or says something in hopes of getting a positive emotional response from their partner. When one partner puts out an emotional bid, the other partner has three options: turn towards the emotional bid and respond positively, turn away from the emotional bid and respond negatively, or ignore it, or not even notice it. Dr. Gottman's research is no joke. He has spent 40 years studying marriages and is able to predict whether or not a couple will get divorced with 83% accuracy. Dr. Gottman has found that those who are masters at their relationship respond positively 86% of the time, while those who are disasters at their relationship respond positively only 33% of the time. He notes that the main reason couples break up or get divorced isn't a single big event like a major fight or infidelity, but instead, it's the growing resentment one or both partners build up when emotional bids get consistently ignored or turned away. As bad as it is to turn away from a bid, the worst is when you ignore or even miss the bid. At least when someone turns away, the other person feels heard and maybe even understood. It just comes with a negative reaction. But when emotional bids are ignored, the person doesn't feel heard or understood at all. Did they ignore me on purpose? Did they even hear what I said? Is my partner tuning out? All these questions can float in the head of the partner who got their bid ignored. Although Dr. Gottman primarily focuses on marital relationships, his work is not by any means exclusive to people with rings on their fingers. The same concept applies to your dating relationships, family, friendships, relationships with coworkers, peers, and people you just met, because all relationships are human relationships. Emotional bids can be either direct or indirect. Direct bids are when someone makes a direct, obvious attempt to get your positive attention, while indirect bids are when someone is subtle or passive. Caring about the other person and being present are two prerequisites for catching emotional bids. You want to aim to catch 8 out of 10 emotional bids. This can be a steep challenge, but that's the effort one must put into building strong relationships. The good news is that if you care about the other person and are present, you're probably catching a good amount of them. Examples of emotional bids. Direct bids. Hey, do you want to get something to eat? Turning towards. Sure, let's get pizza. Not now, but thanks for offering. Turning away. Okay, whatever. I'm good. How was your day? Turning towards. My day was good, explains day. I didn't have a great day, explains day. Turning away. Good. Not bad. Can we talk about insert problem? Turning toward. Sure, what's on your mind? Turning away. Why do we have to talk about that? Come on, it's not that serious. Check out this cool video. Turning toward. Comes over to see. Turning away. I'm busy. I'm good. Indirect bids. I'm really bored. Turning toward. Yeah, me too. Want to go do something? Turning away. Same. Yeah? LeBron James is such a good basketball player. Turning toward. Yeah, he's awesome. Definitely. Do you think the Lakers are winning the NBA championship this year? Turning away. I think he sucks. I don't understand why you watch basketball so much. Stupid. Share the more important details. As the classic saying goes, a person's favorite topic of conversation is themselves. People like talking about themselves because it accomplishes many social goals. Talking about themselves makes them feel important, makes them feel heard and understood, and helps them connect with others by letting other people in on their world. Encouraging people to share things about themselves is a great way to make people like talking with you. This can be done through you leading the conversation but letting them do the talking. If you've ever watched a talk show or listened to a podcast with a guest, you'll notice that the host leads the interaction by asking questions about the other person. But of course, you're having a conversation and not an interview. There's a fine balance between leading the interaction and encouraging other people to share about themselves, but also sharing about yourself during the process. One way to get people talking about themselves is to ask good questions. In order to get on a subject you'd like to talk about, you can directly ask about it or notice it when the subject naturally comes up. From there, you can talk about surface level logical details or get into the emotional details. Asking about the logical details means asking about the what, who, when, where, and how in relation to the topic, which are straightforward and can help people get comfortable talking to you. It can be useful to know certain details, but the real bonding comes when someone gets to talk about, and when you get to understand, their why, their reasoning, and their feelings. If you and another person are talking about hockey, for example, it's one thing to talk about the latest scores, player stats, and who they think will win the Stanley Cup, but it's another thing to ask about why their favorite team is the Toronto Maple Leafs or how they started watching hockey. Of course, the type of answer you would get will depend on how well the other person understands themselves and if they're vulnerable enough to share, but this is a very powerful tool. In a natural flow of a conversation, you'll have both logical and emotional conversation topics, which is a good thing because both make for a great conversation. Just talking about logical aspects of life can get boring and dull, while only talking about the emotional side can creep the other person out. The best way to get people talking about themselves, however, is to start sharing things about yourself. When you do this, you make the interaction more comfortable for the other person to do the same, instead of coming across as though you're the one doing the asking with no sharing. Share your likes and dislikes, your opinions, your stories, and ask them about theirs. Throughout the book, I've been doing this exact thing. Have you noticed that most of the personal stories I share aren't the ones where everything is awesome and goes right for me, but are primarily about the ones where I failed or felt bad? These are going to be far more inspiring to you, since I'm making myself relatable. If we were in conversation now sharing similar stories, you would likely be much more willing to open up and share your experiences, and be more willing to trust and connect with me, because I'm sharing the more important details of my life. One mistake that many unskilled conversationalists can make is that they keep asking new questions instead of building upon the conversation topic at hand. Asking questions to get the conversation going is just the beginning. From there, you can continue to extend the conversation by asking relevant topics beyond the superficial level and establish further familiarity. Key takeaways. Strong social skills are paramount to your success in becoming social. The effectiveness of your speech represents how well you can communicate everything going on internally. Small talk is important because it allows people to establish a sense of commonality and allows for the people to share and gather information about each other. To make your small talk more entertaining, enter conversations with the yes and mentality. Be knowledgeable about subjects of conversation. Be humorous. Avoid constantly asking questions, and tell engaging stories. You will need to get into deeper conversation to build real connections. A good rule of thumb is to transition to deeper connection when you feel comfortable doing so. Transition to deeper conversations isn't a specific phase or procedure. Rather, it's when you introduce topics of conversation that are more personal and allow you and the other person to whom you're speaking to get to know each other better. There are a number of miscellaneous social skills you will need to develop, including dealing with awkward silences, keeping a conversation going, ending conversations, group conversations, and nonverbal communication. The general principle to being socially intelligent is to try to understand what other people think and how they feel, along with being aware of your influence on other people's thoughts and feelings.